assessments. The authors found that participants in the intervention group had fewer depressive symptoms, had higher job retention, and worked more hours than participants receiving usual care. In an editorial, Dr. Kenneth Wells and Professor Jean Miranda from UCLA School of Medicine discuss reasons many persons with depression do not receive treatment and the benefits of improved access to care. The second article deals with colorectal neoplasm in patients. An association between colorectal neoplasm, adenoma, and cancer, and coronary artery disease. In this issue, they report results of a cross-sectional study in Hong Kong that assessed the prevalence of colorectal neoplasm in patients who had a recent coronary angiography for suspected coronary artery disease, and they examined the potential risk factors for having both diseases. The authors found the prevalence of colorectal neoplasms was 34% in persons with new coronary artery disease, compared with the prevalence of 18.8% in persons without coronary artery disease and 20.8% in an age and sex-matched general population control group. Risk factors for the diagnosis of advanced lesions in the colon included the metabolic syndrome and a history of smoking. The third article deals with polyunsaturated fatty acids and islet autoimmunity. Some data have suggested that the risk of type 1 diabetes mellitus is lower in children who receive marine omega-3 containing cod liver oil supplements during infancy, a factor that may reduce the inflammatory response and the risk for autoimmune disease later in life. In a longitudinal cohort of children at increased genetic risk for type 1 diabetes, Professor Jill Norris from the University of Colorado Health Science Center and her colleagues examined the association of dietary intake of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids with the development of islet autoantibodies. The authors report that among 1,770 children enrolled in the study, 58 developed islet autoimmunity. In analysis that were adjusted for HLA genotype, family history of diabetes, caloric intake, and omega-6 intake, dietary intake of omega-3 fatty acids was inversely associated with the risk of developing islet antibodies. And the JAMA patient page has information for your patients about type 1 diabetes. The fourth article in this issue is the Clinician's Corner and deals with neuroendocrine dysfunction after brain injury. It's a clinical review by Dr. Harold Schneider from the Max Planck Institute of Psychiatry in Munich, Germany. He and his colleagues reviewed the diagnosis, natural history, and potential clinical and public health implications of hypopituitarism following traumatic brain injury or subarachnoid hemorrhage. In this issue, we have 4 commentaries. The first deals with sodium intake. Action is needed to achieve recommended reduction in dietary sodium intake. Well, that's for sure. This is a very nicely written commentary by Dr. Stephen Havas from the AMA Department of Science, Quality, and Health. The second commentary deals with bariatric surgery. It's written by Dr. David Flum, who is a contributing editor for JAMA and also is a professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine. And this commentary deals with achieving rational and equitable access to bariatric surgery. The third commentary deals with healthcare reform. It's by Dr. Jennifer Dixon from the King's Fund in London. Competition, physician leadership, and other efforts to reform England's National Health Service is discussed in this commentary. And the fourth commentary deals with vulnerable elders, and it's written by Dr. Carmel Batando Dyer from the University of Texas Houston Science Center, and it deals with the problem of self-neglect among elderly persons. Medical news and analysis deals with the medical news and perspectives. Scientists are zeroing in on potential therapies for Duchenne muscular dystrophy that may boost patients' quality of life. There's also an article in that section on weighing risks and benefits. It's a struggle for both physicians and patients. Health Agency's update has 4 articles. One on MSRA infections on the rise, warfarin label update, Agent Orange hypertension link, and violations probed at the NIEHS NTP. From the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, perinatal group B streptococcal disease after universal screening recommendations in the United States from 2003 to 2005, reduced secondhand smoke exposure after implementation of a comprehensive statewide smoking ban in New York from June 26, 2003 through June 30th, 2004, and a notice to readers about malaria rapid diagnostic test. And finally, a piece of my mind. This deals with a camp for children with life-threatening diseases, and it's written by Sarah Jane Borsch from Framingham, Connecticut. The title is Prescription for Community, and I'll read just 1 sentence. Trust was cultivated carefully and held gingerly at camp. Children can sniff out lies with greater accuracy than a bloodhound. And any of you who care for children or who have children know how true that statement is. And finally, we invite you to join Dr. Romsai Moryasai in Author in the Room teleconference on October 17th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, when he will discuss effective teaching of quality improvement concepts. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting to you. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA, speaking to you from beautiful downtown Chicago, where the wind blows mightily, but the patients are always our top priority.
Big ones look like they pop up fast, but they just melt.
Hello out there. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this week I will tell you about the October 3rd, 2007 issue. And as usual, we'll start with the cover, which in this issue features a painting, I guess that's a painting, attributed to Annibale Fontana, who was an Italian artist who lived from 1540 to 1587, and it features a drug jar for theriac, whatever theriac is. The first 2 articles deal with sex and racial differences in the use of implantable cardioverter defibrillators. Professor Leslie Curtis from Duke Clinical Research Institute and her colleagues analyzed national Medicare patient data from 1991 through 2005 and found that women were significantly less likely than men to receive ICD therapy for either primary or secondary prevention of sudden cardiac death. In the second article, Dr. Adrian Hernandez, also from the Duke Clinical Research Institute, and colleagues analyzed 2005 to 2007 data collected in a voluntary heart failure quality improvement initiative sponsored by the American Heart Association. And they found that fewer than 40% of eligible patients actually received ICD therapy. Women and black patients were significantly less likely than white men to receive an ICD. In an editorial, Dr. Rita Redberg from UCSF School of Medicine discusses possible reasons for sex and racial disparities in ICD use and the implications for clinical decision-making and patient outcomes. The third article deals with Gleason Grade 5 prostate biopsy and prognosis. Prognosis among men with prostate cancer is associated with a Gleason score, which is based on assignment of a grade 1 to 5 to the predominant and second most prevalent histolic patterns. A high grade denotes less differentiation. Some pathologists also assign a tertiary pattern grade, but the relationship of the tertiary pattern to prognosis is not clear. In a cohort of men with node-negative, non-metastatic, and definitely treated biopsy Gleason score 7 prostate cancer, Dr. Abhijit Patel from Harvard Medical School and his colleagues assessed whether there is an association between time to biochemical recurrence, that's prostate-specific antigen or PSA failure, and the presence or absence of tertiary grade 5 disease. The authors found that men with tertiary grade 5 had a median time of PSA failure of 5.0 years, whereas men without tertiary grade 5 had a mean time to PSA failure of 6.7 years. The JAMA patient page has information for your patients about the grading of prostate cancer. The fourth article is a preliminary communication dealing with the effects of perindopril therapy in Marfan syndrome. Cardiac complications of Marfan syndrome include progressive aortic stiffening and dilatation, which can culminate in aortic rupture. In light of evidence that the renin-angiotensin system may be involved in these vascular effects, and that angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors reduce large artery stiffness, Professor Anna Ahimastos from the Baker Heart Research Unit in Melbourne, Australia, and her colleagues tested the effects of adding the ACE inhibitor perindopril versus placebo to standard beta blocker therapy in 17 adult patients with Marfan syndrome. The authors report that patients who were randomly assigned to receive perindopril had reduced aortic stiffness and aortic root diameters compared with patients who received placebo therapy. The fifth article is the Clinician's Corner and deals with hypertension in pregnancy, and it is a clinical crossroads. Mrs. F., a 30-year-old woman with a history of chronic hypertension and possible preeclampsia during her first pregnancy, has concerns about how hypertension may affect a future pregnancy. Dr. Raymond Pori from Harvard Medical School discusses the management of chronic hypertension before, during, and after pregnancy, and the current understanding of preeclampsia. An editorial by Salai reviews additional management considerations and the challenge of identifying women at risk of adverse maternal and perinatal outcomes from hypertensive disease during pregnancy. The sixth article deals with the natural orifice endoscopy surgery, and it is a From the Archives feature. An article in the Archives of Surgery reports a case of natural orifice transluminal endoscopic surgery. In this case, a cholecystectomy via transvaginal access. That's right, you heard me correctly. Cholecystectomy via transvaginal access. Dr. Joe Boyski from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine discusses the emergence of alternatives to open surgery and the benefits of cross-specialty collaboration and standard setting. Now, this article should cause you to pause and think. And no jokes, please. This is an actual case, an actual patient, so read it. The commentary in this issue deals with abortion politics. This is the first of a new series of commentaries on medicine and the law, which will be written by Dr. Larry Gostin from Georgetown University Law Center. And this one deals with the implications of Gonzalez versus Carhart for public trust in the judiciary, clinical freedom, and personal privacy. We also have a literatum, which is an occasional feature in the book review section. And this one has to do with Allegro. It's an examination of the 1946 1987 Rodgers and Hammerstein physician-themed production of Allegro by Dr. Howard Markel from the University of Michigan School of Medicine. And if you want something a little bit different, quite entertaining, but having to do with medicine, read it. Medical News and Analysis deals first with medical news and perspectives. A growing body of animal studies suggests the chemical in some plastics may pose human health risks. And new asthma guidelines have been released, a call for assessment and patient education. And dual antithrombotic therapy increases risks, not always offset by benefits. In the lab reports, there are articles on healthy obese mice. Well, there's a thought. Glaucoma gene, Parkinson disease microRNAs, and stem cells for heart health. And from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, cryptosporidosis outbreaks associated with recreational water use in 5 states in 2006, and a notice to readers, revised recommendations of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice to vaccinate all persons 11 to 18 years with the meningococcal conjugate vaccine. And finally, a piece of my mind. This one is incredibly poignant. It's by Dr. Jose Flores from Boston, Massachusetts. It's entitled, Knowledge is Power. And one sentence reads, if a pluralistic society protects individual decisions, we can certainly conquer the loneliness, fear, and anguish brought about by ignorance, while those irrevocable decisions are being considered. I really want you to read this one. And finally, we invite you to join Dr. Ramzai Bunyasi on October 17th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, when he will discuss effective teaching of quality improvement concepts. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting to you. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, speaking to you from beautiful downtown Chicago, where the wind blows mightily, but the patients are always our top priority. Hello out there. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this week, I am going to tell you about our October 10th, 2007 issue. And as usual, we will start with the cover, which this issue features a painting by Philip Evergood, who's an American painter who lived from 1901 to 1973. And if you've never heard of him, join the crowd. I never did either. This painting is a self-portrait, and it was painted in 1960. It's kind of interesting. Let's see what you think of it. And this one was written up by Christine Quartana instead of Dr. Terry Southgate. So let's see what you think of this. Diagnosed with acute otitis media between September 2003 and June 2006, Dr. Michael Piccichero and his colleague, Dr. Casey, from the University of Rochester School of Medicine, determined the serotype and antibiotic susceptibility of staph pneumoniae cultured from the middle ear fluid obtained by tympanocentesis. 212 tympanocentesis procedures were performed, and the authors report that 59 yielded strep pneumoniae. One novel strain belonging to serotype 19A was identified in 9 cases and was resistant to all antibiotics approved for use in children with acute otitis media. In the same editorial as already mentioned, Dr. Elizabeth Bancroft from LA County Department of Health in California also discusses community-based surveillance for antibiotic resistance and the identification of resistant strains. The third article deals with institutional academic-industry relationships. Institutional academic-industry relationships, or IAIRs, exist when an academic institution or senior official of an institution have a financial interest in a public or private whose conflict of interest is not clear. In a national survey of department chairs, Professor Eric Campbell from the Massachusetts General Hospital and his colleagues examined the nature, extent, and consequences of IAIRs for medical schools and teaching hospitals. The authors report that 60% of department chairs had some form of personal relationship with industry. 67%, 80% clinical, 43% non-clinical, of the departments as administrative entities had relationships with industry, receiving research equipment, unrestricted funds, and support for trainees, research seminars, and professional and department-administered continuing medical education. A majority of department chairs responded that IAIRs, either personal or departmental, did not have a negative effect on departmental activities. However, they did find that the chairs having two or more of these types of relationships did affect negatively the department's ability regarding education and research. The fourth article is the Clinician's Corner and deals with adult cystic fibrosis. Dr. Michael Boyle of Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine discusses cystic fibrosis in adults, including the variability in disease severity and effectiveness of newer therapies in the case of Mr. Y, a 52-year-old man who was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at age 3 years, but who experienced few activity-limiting symptoms or serious health consequences until he was in his 40s. We then have 3 commentaries. The first dealing with severe mental illness and cardiovascular disease. Dr. John Newcomer and Chris Hennekens, Dr. Newcomer being from Washington University School of Medicine, and Dr. Hennekens from the University of Miami School of Medicine, talk about the association of severe mental illness with excess morbidity and premature mortality due to cardiovascular disease. The second commentary was written by Professor Walter Wojcicki and his colleagues from the University of Toronto and deals with pay-for-performance versus fee-for-service. Similarities between pay-for-performance and fee-for-service reimbursement systems are discussed, and it looks like there may be many similarities. The third commentary was written by Dr. Peter Pronovost and his colleagues from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and deals with quality measurement and reporting. They provide a proposal for improving measurement and reporting of healthcare quality. And this issue also contains a research letter on thoracic and lumbar vertebroplasties performed in the United States Medicare enrollees from 2001 to 2005, and it was written by Dr. Darrell Gray from the Center for Quality Improvement and Patient Safety in Rockville, Maryland. In the News and Analysis section, the Medical News and Perspectives has articles on scientists examining benefits, risks of treating preschoolers with ADHD drugs, and the global effort takes aim at rabies, and the comprehensive proteomic profile of amniotic fluid may aid prenatal diagnosis. And the World in Medicine has articles on chikungunya fever, elephantiasis parasite genome, hybrid embryos, and diesel smog and blood clots. That sounds interesting. And from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, multi-state outbreaks of salmonella infections are with raw tomatoes eaten in restaurants in the United States in 2005 and 2006. The second article deals with Salmonella serotypes, enteritis infections among workers producing poultry vaccine in May, November, December 2006. And A Piece of My Mind was written by Charles Grant Kells, who is a lawyer for Moore, Oklahoma, and I'll read one sentence from his piece called The Family Man.
We will soon be on the
Had I been
turnpike.
honest with myself, I would have recognized that I had missed Papa long before he died. This is a very moving piece of my mind, written by a man about his death. And the reader's response to submit your views on the diagnostic or treatment options for a patient at a medical crossroad, and your response may be selected for online publication with the article. And the article that will be featured in October is a 63-year-old man with cardiovascular risk factors but poor adherence to treatment plan. The submission deadline is October 31st, so go to www.jama.com and let's hear from you. That's it for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Please let me know if you have suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting to you. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, speaking to you from beautiful downtown Chicago, where the wind blows mightily, but the patients are always our top priority.
Thank you, JAMA Mama, for making my drive more interesting.
Hello out there. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this week I'm going to tell you about the October 24th, 31st, that's the combined issue of 2007. And this is a JAMA theme issue on poverty and human development. And JAMA joins over 200 journals from around the world, and the list of journals can be found on the Council of Science Editors website, which, if you look in the editorial by Annette Flanagan and Dr. Maggie Winker, you'll be able to find the URL if you want to see which of these journals is contributing. Now, I should tell you, and I have to tell you this because it really bothers me, take a good look at the journals who are participating in this, because you know that this issue will, if you care about it, cost you in the impact factor, because most of these articles, while they are so important for the human race, they certainly aren't articles that will be cited very frequently. So some journals refuse to join because they didn't want to hurt their impact factor. So you might consider that the next time you think about impact factor as being so important. Okay, that was an editorial comment. Forgive me if you don't agree. Now, what we're going to start with, as usual, is the cover, which this issue features a painting by John Frederick Peto, who lived from 1854 to 1907. It's called The Poor Man's Story. It was painted around 1885, and John Peto is an American. If you look at this painting, it shows a shop window that displays a variety of inexpensive items, much like what you'd see in a low-income neighborhood. There's some fruits and some very small and expensive toys. So look at it. Some of you will find it nostalgic. The young people probably won't recognize it at all. The first article deals with informing populations about entitled services. Lack of awareness of entitled health and social services may contribute to poor delivery of these services in some communities. In a cluster randomized trial in rural India, Professor Priyanka Pandey from the World Bank in Washington, D.C., and his colleagues examined whether structured public meetings to inform villagers about entitled health and education services and governance requirements would be associated with improved delivery of health and social services. The authors found that compared with control villages where no public meetings were held, residents of villages randomized to the intervention reported enhanced delivery of health and social services, including more prenatal examinations and supplements, tetanus and infant vaccinations, and a decrease in excess school fees paid. Looks like knowledge is a very valuable thing. The second article deals with environment, nutrition, and child survival. In an analysis of data from 42 countries in Latin America, the Caribbean, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, Professor Emanuela Gaquido from Harvard University Institute for Global Health and her colleagues evaluated whether programs and policies to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger and ensure environmental sustainability improve child survival, and whether improvement is related to household income. The author's analyses suggest that interventions that
That's
improve
where I would've
nutrition
come up,
and
but
provide
I
clean
wouldn't
water,
know.
sanitation, and clean household fuels would be associated with substantial reductions in mortality of children younger than 5 years, particularly among the poor. The third article deals with pediatric antiretroviral therapy in Zambia. A pediatric AIDS treatment program delivered by non-physicians in Lusaka, Zambia, enrolled 4,975 children between May 1st, 2004 and June 29, 2007. 72% of the children had World Health Organization stage 3 or 4 disease, and 2,938 of the children were prescribed 3-drug antiretroviral therapy. Dr. Carolyn Bolton Moore from the Center for Infectious Diseases in Zambia and her colleagues report survival, weight gain, CD4 cell count, and hemoglobin response for children receiving ART, and discuss the factors associated with survival and improvement in clinical status. The fourth article deals with conditional cash transfers and health. Cash transfers conditional on certain behaviors, for example, attending primary health clinics for preventive care, have been advanced as a means to improve access to and use of health services in developing countries. However, evidence that the programs achieve these goals is lacking. In a review of the literature on conditional cash transfers and health access, use, and outcomes, Ms. Mylene Lagarde from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in London and her colleagues found some evidence that cash transfers improve access and use of preventive services, but success is dependent on the adequacy of the existing health and community infrastructures. The fifth article is the Clinician's Corner and deals with oral drug therapy for neglected tropical diseases. Control of the 13 neglected tropical diseases, that is, infectious conditions that occur in areas of extreme poverty, includes evaluation of oral medications that may simultaneously treat multiple diseases. Dr. Madhuri Reddy from Harvard Medical School and colleagues conducted a systematic review of randomized clinical trials that assessed the efficacy of existing oral medications to simultaneously control 2 or more of the 7 most prevalent diseases and report reductions in disease prevalence associated with single or combined oral drug therapies. JAMA Patient Page deals with information for your patients on poverty and health. We have 5 commentaries in this issue. The first deals with microfinance programs and better health, prospects for sub-Saharan Africa, and was written by Professor Paul Pronik from the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. The second deals with factors contributing to high costs and inequality in China's healthcare system, written by Dr. Huli Wang from Peking Union Medical College in China. The third commentary is on the future health consequences of current decline in U.S. household income, and that one was written by Dr. Stephen Wolf from Virginia Commonwealth University. The fourth commentary deals with leveraging university research to advance global health, and it was written by Mr. Dave Chokshi from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And the fifth commentary deals with the science of large-scale change in global health, written by Mr. Joseph McCannon from the Institute Healthcare Improvement in Massachusetts. There are 2 editorials in this issue. The first, written by Dr. Roger Glass from the Fogarty International Center at the National Institutes of Health, deals with bridging the coverage gap in global health. The second deals with the whole global theme issue on poverty and human development, and was written by the 2 editors who handled this issue, Ms. Annette Flanagan, who is our managing editor, and Dr. Maggie Winker, who is a deputy editor of JAMA. The Medical News and Analysis has articles on medical news and perspectives. The first by Jeffrey Sachs, PhD, Extending Extreme Poverty and Improving the Human Condition. The next deals with food insecurity harms health, the well-being of millions in the United States. The third is on the global shortage of health workers, brain drain stress, developing countries. And the fourth, persistence pays off in Guinea worm fight. And the health agency's update has articles on mental health care is lacking, eradicating polio, poor are hit hard by diabetes, and preparedness for flu. We want to remind you about the Author in the Room teleconference. We invite you to join Dr. Monica Clevens on November 21st from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time while she discusses invasive methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus infections. And finally, one of our newest features, Readers Respond. We invite you to submit your views on the diagnostic or treatment options for a patient at a medical crossroad. Your response may be selected for online publication. Submission deadline for this month is October 31st. That's it for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Please let me know if you have suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting for you. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, speaking to you from beautiful downtown Chicago, where the wind blows mightily and today the sun shines brightly. But no matter what the weather, the patients are always our top priority.
What wonderful cross-country skiing will be. They better let us out early so I can
Hello out
skis on
there.
before the
This
snow
is
is
Dr.
gone.
Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of
Some
the
of the best
American Medical
cross-country skiing
Association.
ever
And
last
this week
weekend
I
on
will
the
tell you
bike
about
trail.
the issue for November 7th, 2007. And as usual, I'll start with the art on the cover. And this week,
This
the
happened on like
artist
a
is
Thursday or
John
a
Sloan,
Friday,
who
I don't
lived
know.
from
And we could have a really long
1871
weekend.
through 1951. He was an American,
It's
and
always
in
in the middle of the week
1910,
on like a
he
Tuesday or a
painted this
Wednesday.
picture of pigeons. Now, any of you who lived in cities are quite familiar with this picture, I
Yeah,
think. It's all
pigeons are
those pigeons
everywhere. They're
flying above the
ubiquitous.
rooftops. You take it from there. And the first article deals with tizocentan in patients with acute heart failure. Patients with heart failure have increased plasma concentrations of the vasoconstrictor peptide endothelin-1, which has been associated with worse clinical outcomes. In the value of endothelin receptor inhibition with tizocentan in acute heart failure studies, known as VERITAS, 1,448 patients with acute heart failure were randomly assigned to receive either tizocentan or placebo. Change in dyspnea over 24 hours and the incidence of death or worsening of heart failure at 7 days were assessed. Dr. John McMurray from the Western Infirmary in Glasgow, Scotland, and his colleagues writing for the study investigators report that tizocentan offered no benefit against placebo for these clinical outcomes. Now, for those of you who say that we don't publish negative trials, here's an example for you of a very important negative trial. The second article deals with changing relationship of obesity and disability. Some evidence suggests that today's obese population is healthier than the obese population in the 1960s. To assess whether such health improvement is associated with a reduced risk of disability, Dr. Virginia Chang and Professor Don Alley from the University of Pennsylvania analyzed self-reported functional limitations in mobility and the performance of 3 activities of daily living among participants aged 60 years and older in the National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys for 1988 to 1994 and 1999 through 2004. The authors found that functional impairment
1999 is when I
among obese
graduated high school.
individuals increased 5.4%, and activities of daily living impairment did not change between 1988-94 and 1999-2004. In contrast, among normal weight individuals, there was no change in functional impairment, and activities of daily limitations declined. So in an editorial, Professors Edward Gregg and Jack Goralnick from the CDC discussed the long-term effects of obesity on disability. And the JAMA patient page has information for your patients about assessing disability. The third article deals with excess cause-specific mortality and the CDC and her colleagues found that compared with individuals of normal weight, those who were underweight or obese had significantly increased risk of all-cause mortality, and that overweight individuals had a decreased risk. To further explore these associations, the authors analyzed national data on mortality and body mass index, or BMI, for adults who were 25 years and older, and then calculated cause-specific excess deaths associated with underweight, overweight, and obesity. The authors report cause-specific excess deaths by BMI level for cardiovascular disease, cancer, and all other causes in 2004. And if you want to know exactly what they find, read the article. The fourth article deals with the prevalence of chronic kidney disease in the United States. To update the estimated prevalence of chronic kidney disease in the United States, Dr. Joseph Koresh from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and his colleagues analyzed data from the 1988 through 1994 and the 1999 through 2004 National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys, and they assessed the contributions of diabetes, hypertension, and obesity to changes in the chronic kidney disease prevalence. The authors report that between 1988 and 1999-2004, the prevalence of chronic kidney disease increased from 10% to 13%. The increase in prevalence was partially explained by the increasing prevalence of diabetes and hypertension among individuals 20 years and older. The fifth article is our clinician's corner, and it deals with maximizing evidence-based treatment benefits. It's a clinical crossroads. Mr. P, a 63-year-old man with multiple cardiovascular risk factors, has been poorly adherent to suggested medical treatment for more than 20 years. Dr. Thomas Bodenheimer from the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine discusses a 5-step process for the practice of evidence-based medicine and the responsibility of physicians, healthcare systems, and patients to ensure the benefits of evidence-based medicine are realized. This issue has 3 commentaries. The first is a new monthly special commentary series by Professor Larry Gostin from the Georgetown Law Center, and this one deals with global regulatory strategies for tobacco control. The second commentary is by Dr. Bruce Psady from the University of Washington Medical School and his colleagues, and it deals with a new era of cardiovascular disease epidemiology. And the third commentary is by Dr. Peter Pronovost from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and his colleagues, and that one deals with a framework for healthcare organizations to develop and evaluate a safety scorecard. The medical news and perspectives deal with method to detect circulating tumor DNA may help early diagnosis of cancer. Researchers warm up to hypothermia use after cardiac and brain trauma. Study probes best choice of drugs to reduce phosphate in patients on dialysis. And new screening techniques show potential for early detection of lung cancer. And the lab reports include microRNA and metastasis, Giardia genome unlocked, liver failure treatment, and gene linked to ALS. And from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, outbreaks of respiratory illness mistakenly attributed to pertussis in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Tennessee in 2004 through 2006. And a notice to readers about the MMWR podcast. And a piece of my mind written by Natalie Dugat-Muth, who is a medical student at UNC School of Medicine, is entitled Teddy. And I'll give you one sentence from it. We all use defense mechanisms to deal with pain, and mine was intellectualization. If you're trying to figure out how you intellectualize pain, just read this piece of it.
Drop your $196 check in the mail. You can get the journal and read
compared these with the recent morbidity and mortality data for 13 vaccine-preventable diseases. The authors found significant decreases in the number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths for each of the VPDs examined. The fourth article deals with HIPAA privacy rules and health research. Anecdotal reports and some objective evidence suggest that health research in the United States has been adversely affected by implementation of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that's HIPAA privacy rules. Dr. Roberta Ness, the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, writing for the Joint Policy Committee, Societies of Epidemiology, reports results of a survey of epidemiologists regarding their experiences with subject recruitment, data analysis, and other aspects of research conduct since the implementation of the privacy rules. Among the survey findings were that 2/3 of respondents thought the rule had a negative influence on the conduct of research, and only 1/4 thought the rule had enhanced confidentiality and a privacy for the research participants. In an editorial, Dr. Norman Foss from the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Dr. Robert Levine from Yale University School of Medicine discussed the increasing regulation of human subjects research. And the fifth article is the Clinician's Corner and deals with the evaluation and treatment of Chagas disease. It's a systematic review. Evidence-based recommendations for the evaluation, counseling, and treatment of patients with chronic tympanosoma cruzi infections or Chagas disease in the United States. And the person who wrote this very nice review is Dr. Karen Byrne from the CDC. And the JAMA patient page has information for your patients about Chagas disease. In this issue, we have from the Archives Journal abstracts and commentary dealing with pharmacotherapy for adolescent smoking cessation. It is from the Archives of Pediatrics and Adolescent Medicine, in which Professor Susan Colby and Professor Chad Gwaltney from Brown University write an article reporting the results of a randomized trial that compared sustained release bupropion with placebo for adolescent smoking cessation. They discuss the challenges of helping adolescents achieve long-term abstinence from smoking. The three regular commentaries deal with Congress responding to the IOM drug safety report in full, and that one was written by Dr. Bruce Sadie from the University of Washington School of Medicine and Dr. David Korn from the American Association of Medical Colleges. The second commentary deals with current hospital disaster preparedness and was written by Dr. Amy Kaji from the UCLA School of Medicine and her colleagues. And the third commentary deals with the impending disappearance of the general surgeon. And this one is by Dr. Joseph Fisher from the Harvard Medical School. The Medical News and Perspectives have stories about the new studies examining the efficacy of the 7-valent pneumococcal conjugate vaccine in children and the human papillomavirus vaccine in women, as well as the impact of bacterial or viral strains not covered by these vaccines. The Medical News also has articles about the antibiotic-resistant superbugs and that they may be listening. Please let me know if you have any suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting to you. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA, speaking to you from beautiful downtown Chicago, where the wind blows mightily, but the patients are always our top priority. Hello out there. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the Editor-in-Chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. This week, I will tell you about the November 21st, 2007 issue of JAMA. And as usual, let's start with the cover, which this issue features a painting by George Inness, who lived from 1825 through 1894. He was an American painter, and the cover is a painting of the home at Montclair. He painted it in 1892. When I look at this painting, to me it brings great nostalgia. Let's see what it does for you. The first article deals with rapid response teams in pediatric hospitals. Some data suggests that among adult inpatients, rapid response teams, that's RRTs, reduce the rates of mortality and cardiopulmonary arrest outside the intensive care unit. But whether RRTs offer benefits for pediatric inpatients is not clear. Therefore, Dr. Paul Sharrett from Stanford University School of Medicine and his colleagues determined hospital-wide mortality rates and code rates outside the ICU before and after implementation of an RRT at an academic children's hospital. The authors found that compared with the 56 months before implementation, in the 15 months after the RRT implementation, the mean monthly mortality rate decreased by 18%, and the mean monthly code rate decreased 72%. In an editorial, Drs. Jeffrey Nowak and Richard Riley from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine discuss current data on pediatric RRTs and directions for future investigation. The second article deals with obesity, hemodilution, and PSA levels. Now you say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, recent studies have found that obese men have lower circulating levels of prostate-specific antigen, that's PSA, than non-obese men. In a large retrospective cohort study of men who had radical prostatectomy for prostate cancer, Dr. Lionel Banez from Duke University Medical Center and colleagues assessed whether a larger plasma volume in men with higher body mass index, that's BMI, was associated with lower PSA concentrations. The authors found that men with higher BMI had higher plasma volume and lower PSA concentrations, suggesting a hemodilution effect. Now, you better keep that in mind when we're looking at PSAs in obese men. The third article deals with employers' use of value-based purchasing. Value-based purchasing, which includes quality measurement, reporting, and pay for performance, has been portrayed as a key element in health system improvement. In a survey of employers from 41 randomly selected and nationally representative healthcare markets, Professor Meredith Rosenthal from Harvard University School of Public Health and her colleagues examined the degree to which value-based purchasing 5,240 steps. I've got about 3,000 more to go today. And that's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting to you. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, speaking to you from beautiful downtown Chicago, where the wind blows mightily, but the patients are always our top priority. Hello out there. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this week, I'm going to tell you about the December 5th, 2007 issue. And as usual, we'll start with the cover, which for this issue features a painting by Cecilia Beaux, that's B-E-A-U-X, who lived from 1855 to 1942, and the painting is entitled Ernesta, Child with Nurse. It was painted in 1894, and Cecilia Beaux is an American painter. The first article deals with antibiotics and steroids for acute sinusitis. 'Tis the season. Antibiotics for acute sinusitis are controversial, and evidence regarding the use of topical steroids is equivocal at best. So Dr. Ian Williamson from the University of Southampton in England and colleagues report the results of a clinical trial in which adult patients with acute maxillary sinusitis were randomly assigned to one of 4 treatment groups: an antibiotic, that's amoxicillin of 500 milligrams 3 times a day for 7 days, an intranasal steroid, that's budesonide, 200 micrograms in each nostril daily for 10 days, or placebo, antibiotic and steroids, or an antibiotic and placebo steroid, or a placebo antibiotic and placebo steroid. The authors found that neither amoxicillin nor topical budesonide alone or in combination were superior to placebo in the treatment of acute sinusitis. In an editorial, Dr. Morten Lindbæk from the University of Oslo in Norway discusses the implications of these findings for patient care. And the JAMA patient page has information for your patients about acute sinusitis. The second article deals with anti-thrombotic strategies in acute coronary syndromes, that's ACS. In the prospective acute catheterization and urgent intervention triage strategy, that's acuity trial, moderate risk and high risk patients with acute coronary syndromes undergoing early invasive management were randomly assigned to one of 3 pharmacological treatment regimens: heparin plus glycoprotein 2B3A inhibitors, bivalirudin plus glycoprotein 2B3A inhibitors, or bivalirudin monotherapy. Among the 30-day outcomes reported previously was that bivalirudin monotherapy was non-inferior to heparin plus glycoprotein 2B3A inhibitors in reducing ischemic events. In this issue, Dr. Greg Stone from Columbia University Medical Center and his colleagues, writing for the acuity investigators, report that at 1 year, rates of composite ischemia or mortality did not differ significantly across pharmacotherapy treatment groups. The third article deals with cardiorespiratory fitness, adiposity, and mortality. Dr. Sumai Sui from the University of South Carolina School of Medicine and colleagues examined the independent and joint associations of cardiorespiratory fitness and adiposity with mortality in an analysis of data from adults 60 years and older at baseline who received periodic health examinations and counseling regarding diet, exercise, and other lifestyle factors at one preventive health clinic. During a mean 12-year follow-up, the authors found that low cardiorespiratory fitness at baseline was a significant predictor of all-cause mortality independent of overall or abdominal adiposity. supported in the literature despite strong contradictory evidence from randomized trials. And so, dear readers, keep reading and pay attention to the randomized trials, especially when they contradict the observational studies that were published previously. The fifth article is The Clinician's Corner is a clinical crossroads and deals with dementia and eating problems. Mr. P, a 93-year-old man with end-stage dementia and recent hip fracture, can no longer orally maintain adequate hydration and nutrition. Dr. Susan Mitchell from Harvard University Medical School discusses palliative care for patients with advanced dementia, treatment options for feeding problems, and ways to provide effective and caring decision support to the patient and family. This issue also has two commentaries. The first is by Mr. Lawrence Gostin, who is a professor and dean of the Georgetown University Law Center, and the first one is about tobacco wars, global litigation strategies. The second commentary is by Dr. David Satcher, the former Surgeon General of the United States, who is now at Morehouse School of Medicine, and he talks about natural and man-made disasters and mental health. This issue also has a research letter by Dr. Jennifer Kellen from the University of Toronto in Canada, and it deals with YouTube as a source of information on immunization. It's a content analysis. Now there's something for you young people out there who are really into YouTube. And the medical news and perspectives, evidence of the effectiveness of medication coupled with brief behavioral interventions for alcohol use disorders, is helping to shift treatment from inpatient specialist care to office-based general practices. Medical news and perspectives also has some articles about researchers deconstruct metastasis, that's the genetics clues that are revealed. Personalized care may help smokers quit. Well, we'll take anything that will help smokers quit. And the lab reports have articles on Alzheimer's disease drug, fish and breast cancer, a use for the appendix, as in the appendix in the GI tract, what am I supposed to do? And retinoblastoma surprise. And from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, national, state, and local area vaccination coverage among children aged 19 to 35 months in the United States in 2006, and the recommended adult immunization schedule for the United States, October 2007 to September 2008. And finally, A Piece of My Mind, written by Professor Susan Bohaniak from Lafayette, New York. And the title is Words. And one quote, "Do you know the worst thing about living there? They don't see us anymore." Professor Bohaniak volunteers as a hospice aide in a nursing home, and she writes about one of the patients there. And there is a call for papers on the HIV/AIDS issue. The authors are invited to submit manuscripts for an upcoming JAMA theme issue. And the readers respond, how would you manage a 39-year-old man with erythema and swelling of a finger? Go to www.jama.com to read the case and submit your response. Your response may be selected for online publication, and submission deadline is December 26, 2007. That's it for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Please let me know if you have suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting to you. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, speaking to you from beautiful downtown Chicago, where the wind blows mightily and the patients are always our top priority. Hello out there. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this week I will tell you about the December 12th, 2007 issue of JAMA. And as usual, we'll start with the cover, which this week features a painting by Michelangelo Caravaggio, who lived from 1571 to 1610, and it's entitled The Musicians. It was painted in 1595 home-based geriatrics care management. Older adults, and particularly those who are poor, often fail to receive health care that meets recommended standards. Dr. Stephen Council from Indiana University School of Medicine and his colleagues designed a primary care and home-based geriatric care management program and assessed the quality of care received, acute care utilization, health-related quality of life, Perspectives has an article on researchers at the American College of Chest Physicians annual meeting reported findings on improper use of inhalers by patients with airway disease, potential prophylactic care for rescue workers, and care of student athletes with asthma. There are also articles on aiding emergency research, is the aim of the report on informed consent to exceptions, and reports to help identify and manage autism.
About the prevalence of BRCA1 mutations in
Medicine in New Zealand and his colleagues analyzed data from a longitudinal prospective cohort study that included several self-reported assessments of tobacco and cannabis use in young adulthood and dental examinations at ages 26 and 32 years of age. The authors report that after controlling for tobacco smoke,
so important. Read it. This is kind of interesting. And we also have an editorial, a call for papers on our upcoming theme issue on Health of the Nation. That will be in mid-October, so get those papers into us, please. All authors are encouraged to submit manuscripts for the upcoming issue. And the readers respond, how would you manage a 74-year-old man who has moderate daily alcohol use, memory loss, and progressive neuropathy? Go to www.jama.com to read the case and submit your response. Your response may be selected for online publication. The submission deadline for this case is February 27th. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have suggestions to make this podcast more educational or interesting to you. And this is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, speaking to you from not-so-beautiful today, Chicago, where the wind is blowing mightily, but even today, the patients are always our top priority. Hello out there. This is Dr. Kathy DeAngelis, the editor-in-chief of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this week I will tell you about the issue for February 13th, 2008. And as usual, we will start with the cover. And this week's cover, I admit, is one of the most unusual I have ever seen. It's a painting by Gustav Klimt, who lived from 1862 to 1918. It's entitled The Kiss. And it was painted around 1907 to 1908, and of course it's Austrian. And to put this in perspective, I'm going to read one sentence that Dr. Terry Southgate wrote in writing about this 6.5-foot canvas painting. Quote, accused of painting erotic, even pornographic images, the author said he would leave it to the pictures to speak for him. Well, I'm not sure I'd call this pornographic or perhaps not even erotic, but it sure is different. Let's see what you think. And the first and second articles deal with ventilation strategies in acute lung injury. 2 articles in this issue report the results of 2 clinical trials that compare the effects of different ventilation strategies on mortality in patients with acute lung injury. In the first article, Dr. Maureen Mead from McMaster Medical School in Canada and her colleagues randomly assigned patients with acute lung injury to either established low tidal volume, that's 6 ml per kilogram of predicted body weight strategy, or an experimental strategy combining low tidal volume ventilation and higher levels of positive end expiratory pressure, that's PEEP, than the established strategy, and the recruitment maneuvers to open collapsed lung tissues. The authors found that all-cause hospital mortality were similar in both patient groups. In the second article, in an investigation of the optimal level of PEEP in patients with acute lung injury, Dr. Alain Mercat from Angers, France, and his colleagues randomly assigned patients to a minimal alveolar distension moderate PEEP strategy, that's 5 to 9 centimeters of water, or a high PEEP, that's maximum plateau pressure 28 to 30 centimeters of water, lung recruitment strategy. The authors found that the increased recruitment PEEP strategy was not associated with significant improvements in 28-day or 60-day mortality compared with the moderate PEEP strategy. In one editorial, Dr. Luciano Bottani and Pietro Carioni from the University of Milan in Italy discussed the implications of the study outcomes for improved care of patients with acute lung injury. In a second editorial, Dr. Jean-Daniel Chiche from the University René Descartes in France and Dr. Derek Angus from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, who is also a contributing editor for JAMA, also write about the implications of these studies. The third article deals with spine problems and health expenditures. Back and neck pain are common reasons for adults to seek medical care. In an analysis of data from the Nationally Representative Medical Expenditure Panel Survey from 1997 to 2005, Mr. Brooke Martin from the University of Washington School of Medicine and colleagues examined trends in expenditures for back and neck problems, that's spine problems, and associated trends in self-reported health status. The authors found that persons with spine problems had incidents in 1997. Looks like lots of people have pains in the neck. The fourth article deals with responses to institutional conflicts of interest. Institutional financial conflicts of interest may affect research results and compromise institutional integrity and the public's trust.